Hello and welcome to Seeds of Elegance with me, Libby, and I'm here with Anusha Suresh, embodiment coach. I am back. We are back after quite a season away, and it feels so deep and special to have Anusha be the person who I am really bringing this series back with.
Mm.
And sometimes in the past, I would give a little intro to Elegance Lab at the beginning of these calls, but I'm going to allow that to come forth within this
Mm.
conversation. So
Mm.
I'd like to just begin with saying hello, Anusha, and giving you the chance to introduce yourself, your work in the world, and maybe just one thing that you're bringing into this space here in Elegance and in 2025.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you for that beautiful opening, honestly, and the prayer that we did before this call. I absolutely enjoyed it. For all your listeners, I'm Anusha. I am a breathwork facilitator, an embodiment coach, and a love, sex, and relationship coach. Um, I'd like to believe that I am a curious child, constantly in seek, a permanent student, and just allowing the goddess to move through me, to speak through me, to anchor through me, and to experience life through me. It's almost as if they say, right? Like divinity experiencing itself. That's what I'd like to believe my life is. And something that I'd like to anchor into 2025 as an essence of elegance would be just open-hearted curiosity. I think I'm in a phase of life when I'm really just coming into my own, and um, as there's an old Tamil saying here, "Katrathu kallalavu, karkathathu kadalalavu," which means the amount that I have learned or what I have known is the size of a grain of sand, but the amount that I don't know and that's elusive and out there that is yet to be known and sought after and learned is the size of the ocean. So I think that's what I believe, and in constant seek of that ocean.
Oh, thank you. Ooh. Okay, so with the ocean theme present, there's a lot in what you just shared, but I want to bring this reminder, or maybe, yeah, just welcome this vision of
Mhm.
an experience that we had, a moment that we
Mhm.
put together when we were studying in Vita, which, as you may,
Mhm.
is sex love relationship coach, and this is where,
Yeah.
and the first, I would love to share with our audience just two encounters that I had with you because it's such a gift to introduce you to others and to other people who will be learning from me or be a part of my life because I truly
Mhm.
consider you one of my teachers and plan to continue
Oh,
from you.
thank you. Thank you.
And to anchor that, I'll just share two memories of my first encounters with you. One was I had just joined this experience, and it's wild because now I'm talking about feminine embodiment every single day. But at that time, this was the first time I was in a space of all women, primarily women, learning, connecting to the female body, connecting to exploring, expanding what it is to be in this body and in this being. And I walked into that space the way that I have walked into many spaces, which is carrying this kind of Christian, like there is a right way. Not saying all Christianity is this, but when you're raised in American Christianity and you're like, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, like I always joke with people, I've taken my missionary mindset and I've brought it everywhere. You could also call it a colonizer mindset, but it's like, I have the way, or there is a way. Even if I don't think I have it, it's like I'm constantly looking for the right way to do it. And I had an encounter with a woman. She actually wasn't in our program, it was outside of it, but she was someone who was presenting as like a divine feminine healer or whatever. And we had an encounter, and I was upset. And I was like, this woman was a bitch. Like, that's not what the divine feminine is. That's not fair. She can't use that word. And you were like, well, Libby, first of all, I don't think you get to say what is divine feminine or not. And I'll let you give some more language to this. And second of all, there was a moment in that conversation too where the ocean came up and we were talking about fear and this remembrance that love and power and whatever was on the table there, it's both. I think we were actually talking about sexuality at that moment, but it's both scary and encompassing. Like you don't get to have one without the other if you're really coming in for this journey. The ocean is beautiful and terrifying. And yeah, the ocean has continued to be a theme, but we'll get into that second story after. So I wanted to ask you for your remind us of that situation also because even though that was a huge growing point for me,
Mhm.
there might be listeners right now who you feel I actually had an encounter a couple months ago with a woman who was like, I hate feminism, like all these intellectual women who don't know anything about what it's like living like blah blah,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and there's a lot of reasons to have a lot of emotions
Mm,
about a lot of things,
mm,
and especially things
mm.
about gender. And so I just want to allow room as you're listening for what comes up, while also inviting this
Mm.
childish exploration that me and Anusha both bring here. So,
Yeah, yeah. Mm. I love that. I love that we're talking about the divine feminine. Um, and I think it is something that has been spoken so much about. And there's also just very recently I did a podcast with somebody here in India. Her name is Sapna. And I very openly said in the podcast that this is going to piss a lot of people off, but it is what it is, right? Let's face it, the world we live in is not gray. I mean, it is gray in many sense, but there are polarities, and there are very obvious polarities that you cannot ignore, right? If you look at nature all around you, there are polarities. There is feminine, there is masculine. And not to say that it is polar in the sense that you can embody only one versus the other, that these polarities exist within you as every living being, right? Be it an animal, be it a plant, or be it a human being, we have these two polarities within us. We have the divine masculine as well as the divine feminine within us. We are embodied in it. And I think it's been an easier concept for me to grasp because of the land that I belong to and because the teachings are so wide here, right? When we see it as a concept within the Tantric philosophy or within the Vedantic philosophy, we have Shiva and Shakti, right? None of them are seen as one is better than the other or one is competing with the other. They're always seen as aspects completing each other. It's almost like North Pole and South Pole. You can't have a magnet with just North Pole or just the South Pole, or say that, no, like it's one is bigger than the other. We don't say that. A magnet exists because it has a North Pole and a South Pole. And similarly, for every human being to access their magnetism, they need to acknowledge their North Pole and their South Pole, which becomes the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And we can use different words to describe it. We find that the English language is really limiting in trying to encompass the philosophy of it. So we can use multiple languaging that sticks well with your nervous system, that doesn't irritate you as much. So you can use the words like lunar for the feminine and the solar for the masculine, or you can use the yin for the feminine and the yang for the masculine, right? But for somebody who wants to argue that why yin has to be feminine, why can't yang be feminine and things like that, well, like I said, English is a language which is very limiting in trying to understand this, right? Whereas the Tantric philosophy, it was so easy. It was just Shiva and Shakti. It was very easy, where Shiva was always seen as pure consciousness that was completely, um, it's just all encompassing, just wisdom, just knowledge, just, consciousness in its purest form, but lifeless nonetheless. And it required Shakti to imbue life into that consciousness. So everything that you take from intuition to flow to creation, everything came from the feminine essence of Shakti. She also represents the chaos of the cosmos. There's this common saying that before everything existed, there was just pure consciousness. And on one day, this pure consciousness wanted to witness itself, to see itself, because it was just there floating as just energy, right? What sets things in motion? It's Shakti that sets things in motion. It's the feminine that sets things into motion. That's why the Big Bang got created. And it's said that, in the Kalika Puran and in the Devi Bhagavatam, it is said that when Devi comes in and she sees the entire cosmos is just like a void, like a dark void, she feels like, how would it be if life was created? And it's said that she began to smile. And as her smile expanded, the entire cosmos got created. And that's why she's considered as a mother of the entire cosmos. That is the feminine, right? In today's world where we have so much wounding of the feminine in the patriarchal world, where we believe that being a woman equals to weakness, or we're fighting, fighting, fighting for our equality. So many of us have this miscued idea that fighting for equality means being better men than men can be. But what if fighting for equality meant that I'm simply worthy and amazing for just who I am? Embodied in my masculine or my feminine on any particular day.
Ooh.
I think that's my take on femininity and the feminine principle, right? Because when I anchor myself in the stories of the goddess, and when I go back to the roots of where femininity and masculinity came from, Shiva and Shakti, the essence, they're inseparable. In our philosophy, in the tantric philosophy, they are inseparable. You can never see Shakti without Shiva, and you can never see Shiva without Shakti. Like, in fact, there's even a saying that Shiva, the E syllable in Shiva is Shakti. And the seed sound Eem, Hreem, wherever you see the sound E, that's the representation of the energy of the feminine. That without her energy, nothing moves in the world. Imagine if that was what you were taught as a child, right? And in Sanskrit, Shiva, as I said, is conscious energy, consciousness, pure consciousness, collective consciousness. And it is said that he's also pure consciousness because of the E in him, the Shiva. If you remove the E, he becomes Shava. Shava in Sanskrit means a dead body. So he becomes dead without Shakti embedded into him. So, I mean, it is what it is, like I said.
Mm. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna bring the second story and allow
Mhm.
this to just continue to blend. And I
Mhm.
also want to invite both of us, since we're intuitive, if there's a point where it feels like we might want to just pause and let something sit
Mhm.
with our
Mhm.
audience,
Mhm.
that's welcome here. And not a normal,
Yeah.
that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we might need that around in the next 15 minutes. I'm gonna put it as like kind
Yeah.
of the intermission point. I'm just gonna tentatively throw that out there that in about 15 minutes
Yeah.
of course
Yeah. Yeah.
listeners can pause things, but we are accustomed to endless information coming at us. And while we're talking about
Mm.
this balance and this rebalancing, uh, I want to invite, even in this space, even in the way that we share these words, these stories, these
Mm.
reflections, these moments of our beings grappling with this, that
Mm.
we get to change our orientation and how we're even listening, how we're even speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second experience, even as you were talking, I was like, oh wow, there's way more than two experiences that I would want to point to. But the second one came a little later when you and I were assigned or chose to do a practicum together, which is where we each practice a coaching method that we're learning with.
Mm.
And the experience that you had coached me in that moment, I'd like to share about because it's a vision that continues to serve me. it was a moment where I was dealing with my anger, which is still something that is a part of my world a lot. It's a learning how to navigate that anger, and our work in the feminine involves that.
Yeah.
And you and I
Yeah.
have many situations beyond that
Yeah.
that continues to be about this, and I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I get to sit here and say this is actually a process and a journey rather than a pill or a like you just get one thing, your perspective shifts and everything's better. Like this, the journey with anger is the journey with love, uh, in my vantage point, or at least in this space that I'm in. I don't think I'll be here forever. But the image at that time, which was came from not just an anger, but a fear that I'm being left alone. And you were guiding me in the style of coaching that we do. I know both of us have created our own methods as well now. But in the one we were
Yeah.
trained in and that I think we still both identify with, we include meditation, we include guided embodied
Yeah.
breath is there, where connecting to senses in the body is there, so that you're not just thinking about things, you're tapping in to your
Mm.
whole experience. And you helped guide me in the moment that I was in to witness another experience that was happening at the same time. So what it felt like for me is that I'm alone in this house. This is how I remember it. Let me know if you remember it differently, but I'm like, I'm alone and I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting what I
Yeah.
need. And I want to speak that since you were just describing Shiva and Shakti and this concept of cosmic intelligence and cosmic support.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in this house and I'm like, nope, I'm not getting what I need. I'm intentionally
Yeah.
closing this to just give that energy of your whole body tightened. And the image that came to me at that time was of this like a giant octopus, some squid, um,
Yeah.
which I've used on different things that I've talked about here because that squid image is something I had from growing up in New York and
Mm.
go to this museum, the Natural History Museum, and there being this giant squid the size of a real squid, and me being, or there's a giant whale and then a giant squid, and both of them scared me when I was a kid. So here I am, like afraid of this image, but at the same time, it's like knocking on all the doors of the house and all the windows and being like, if you would just let me in, like I'm fucking all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this grew in that moment. It grew it was in many ways an embodied experience of the conversation we had already had prior, but this living recognition that what I'm perceiving as fear is, again, is connected to love. And
Mm.
I might feel afraid of it, but it's also what is in that moment for me a part of myself that is so much bigger than I can comprehend.
Yeah. And I vividly remember the moment when you said that, the octopus is just like, open at least a window. Like, open a window and
Just
let
a
the sun
window.
come in. Just a window. Let the sun come in and you'll realize I'm here. It was such a powerful, that's the beauty of somatic work, right? It's not only empowering and transformative to the coachee who's being coached, but it's also so transformative to the coach itself, right? I still carry the remembrance of the sessions that we've had together, not just the times when I've been coached by you, but also of the times when I've coached you, especially I'll never forget this Rainbow Bright version of your inner child who was like rainbow bright. Like, I still remember her, I still honor her in my being. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
That's powerful. I sat down at a coffee shop the other day and I had and for American listeners, Rainbow Bright literally is a character in a show.
Mm,
But I don't know if people outside of the US knew that show because it's even with
no.
for my time, but I had older siblings, so they
Mm,
knew of it.
mm,
So again, like an image from childhood coming back,
yeah.
but the images of the rainbow would always come through my visions. And I was just at a coffee shop on Friday. I had all these rainbow pens and markers, and there were some other people
Mm,
who also had a bunch of colors. And I was like, oh, look, we like we both have all this stuff. And then it was a couple. And they're like, hey, the other person who loves rainbows, look at this thing. And they brought out this other thing, and I just said, it's funny is I teach meditation and embodiment, and I always loved color. Like from the time I was a kid, I would color on things and I always had colorful backpacks and clothes and everything. But when I started doing meditation a couple of years ago, and like there's always rainbow in my images when I'm
Mm,
like connected to my most
mm.
childlike or alive self. So these things are not just like outer preferences, they're rooted.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's constant anchoring of authenticity, right? Like that's what it is at the end of the day. Through the work that we do, we're able to not only anchor in our own authentic selves, but we're also able to tap into somebody else and give and sort of be that mirror of allowance that you're allowed to be who you actually are on the inside, and you'll be loved irrespective. And you have the permission to love yourself. And I feel like that's what I received from you as well in our coaching calls, the allowance of who I am, and to be able to be seen in that, right? Without judgment, with acceptance and allowance and love. I think those are the seeds of love. Those are the seeds of elegance,
Ooh.
right? For you to come into who you are is that allowance of that elegance to bloom within you, which ultimately anchors you in love.
Mm,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing that. And given now that elegance is present, I would love to invite, we're bringing in a couple themes, but I want to name something very clearly. Like I won't speak for you, but
Mhm.
at least for me, when I'm having this conversation with you, I'm like, there's so much ease in my system.
Mm.
You wrote a Facebook post a couple months ago that I reposted that was like pretty much mirrored something you said it as you got on this call, like allowing the dance of life to move through you. And this
Yeah.
post specifically was about the Divine Mother and the feeling of the Divine Mother moving through you.
Yeah.
And even though it's easy, it feels easy in this moment to sit here and feel so anchored in like elegant. I have my Elegance lab at
Yeah.
border behind me. You have like Anusha's Academy of Alchemy is up and running. But those words, phrases, ideas, they actually were, I mean, they've been seeds in us for a long time, but they were just getting
Yes.
activated a year and a half ago when we were doing our session
Yes.
together. And both of us were kind of holding space for parts of us that needed to come out, fears that were coming up.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder because then, we both have this quality of embodiment, feminine awakening, feminine leadership. However, we want to talk about all that, we can get there. But I wonder if we
Mhm.
could just zoom back and if you could share, like, what has it been like for you to be somebody who maybe wasn't interested in this or was like outside of this work in some way,
Mhm.
encountering it, and then choosing to make a path in it, whether you consider yourself choosing it or like being chosen or just being magnetized or led by it. I don't know. I'll let you answer that because at first,
What is when you mean outside of this work, what work do you mean? Could you like be more specific?
yeah.
Is it like Vita? Are you talking about Vita or something else?
I would call it just like divine feminine awakening.
Mm, mm, mm.
So things that
I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's something that's always been on my mind in terms of the divine feminine awakening. I think the dance with the feminine has always been on, at least for the last that I can recollect, I think it's been on for the last 15 years. My constant seek of the feminine, because everything that was anchored in the world just didn't feel right. Something about it didn't feel in alignment. Like it kept, like my nervous system kept saying, this can't be it. Like this can't be all of it. Like I'm sure there's something more to this. Like there was a constant seek curiosity that there has to be more than this. There has to be better. There has to be something different. Right. And I think that quest has really continued and blossomed across these last 15 years, finding different languages, different tools, different teachings, different anchorings. But the underlying question to all of this is there has to be something different. There has to be something better. There has to be something more relevant to today, right? Like that's been the quest that has continued from, like I said, last 15 years. And that has really, it's been like an amoeba that has been shape-shifting constantly, right? Like I can only speak from where I am today, but I can't really say where I would be tomorrow, because I see that it has really changed forms across these, almost a decade and a half. And it all began with questioning that this can't be the way of life where everything is just anchored in the masculine. Like everything is the masculine way. Everything is a very yang expression. Everything is so external. Like even if you look at the way women ourselves are in any space, we're constantly competing with the way of the world today, which is constantly competing with being 100% efficient 100% of the times. None of us are really bringing in conversations around how do we become intentional in our cycles? How do we become intentional with our energy portals? How do we become intentional with the innate wisdom that we carry within our bodies? And this has been a question that has kept coming up, and it started with holding small women's circles 15 years back to then holding global circles. And I recognize that stories across the globe for women are pretty much the same. The characters may differ, the settings may differ, but the underlying stories are literally the same. And that made me wonder, like, is this the world we've crafted for ourselves? There has to be something different, right? And at that time, my quest led me to actually my cycle started syncing with the moon. The more I started doing meditations and held like moon circles, my cycle started syncing with the moon. There was a new kind of magic that I was beginning to tap into my being, which felt empowering within me. To finally see my own periods as not something horrible like a curse on womanhood, to actually being a gift of reflection that's coming every month to remind me of what I need to shed for the month, what are the seeds of intentions that I need to sow. So I began sort of realigning the way that I saw myself, my cycles, and me as a woman for a very long time because of experiences that I've had with abuse and sexual abuse. And, just the patriarchy in India is very, I mean, I think the entire world has patriarchy, but in India, it shows up in very strange ways. So there's been such an irritation that was created in my system that made me believe that life would have been so much simpler if I was a man. For a very long time, there was this constant thing that what I mean, it would have been so easy if I was born a man. Like if I wasn't a woman, I wouldn't have these troubles. And couple that with abuse, with body image issues, that really was the recipe to hate myself, right? Hate the skin that I was born in, hating the gender that I was born in. So today, the Anusha that you see that is so embodied in the feminine has come a long way. And I wouldn't say anything that did not come out of my experiential learning. Like, I wouldn't parrot something that I have read unless I have proof that it exists, right? So it began with aligning my moon cycles and recognizing the power and really accessing my own magnetism. That's when like Vita came into my life. Of course, there were other tantric practices which I was constantly doing. Like I come from a family lineage of spiritual practitioners, so all of that really contributed to it when I came across the Vita program. Um, and I really wanted to apply this. I'm talking about when I was 23 years old. I was 24, maybe. I was married at that time to a man who felt all of this was nonsense. And he didn't allow me to enroll myself in the course. He said, what do you want to do? Do you just want to what's a sex coach? Do you want to put yourself on a platter and just present yourself to the world? Is that what you want to do?
Yes, I do actually, while I'm married to you.
Yeah, so that really irritated my system because imagine coming in with already trauma of, sexual trauma and things like that. And then to have your own husband say that, oh, if you do this, you're just offering yourself up on a platter for the creeps in the world to dine on. That really irritated my nervous system that I stayed away from it for a very long time, for almost like 8 years. I didn't do it. Um, in in the last 3 years, I left my ex-husband, I got a divorce, and I signed up for Vita. That was the first thing that I did. The first thing that I did to invest in myself. I said, I'm going to gift myself this
Mm,
because it's been on my mind for so long. And this is something that feels so in alignment to who I am. And I feel like this is the next breadcrumb along my way of the seek. So I enrolled myself in this, and it's really changed my life. Yeah.
mm. Thank you for sharing just bits. I can't wait till there's a movie.
Yeah, really. I mean, it is what it is, right? Like it's beautiful. The practices were so beautiful. Um it really helped me have almost a global language to things that I already knew and learned from local traditions here. And it's only helped deeply embody the teachings, right? And it's also helped me rise, like everything within the program has helped me rise into my power, into who I am, and to be embodied in what I bring to the table. It's helped me recognize these things, right? Be it in our sessions together in the 10 coaching sessions, which has really helped me work through my fears and rise in my power and really get intentional with what do I want to anchor in the world. Two, the amount of times that my nervous system has been triggered by the system itself, right?
Mm,
Like we even spoke about appropriation of Tantra and how Tantra is being viewed by the Western audiences and by some of our own peers within the program of, cultural misappropriation and things like that. Like the irritation that that brought to an extent where for the first time, I've had to really stand up and scream.
mm,
Like my nervous system felt so vulnerable, yet so fiercely protective of a practice that I've been doing all my life. And here I see it like not being represented the right way by some people. And it just did not sit well with me, right? And it really pushed me to stand up and voice myself in a group of completely like so many unknown people. There were few of them that I knew, but the larger community is completely unknown. Random strangers that I haven't interacted with. But nonetheless, this rang true. So it also taught me how to stand in my truth and speak it, even if it's not the loudest voice in the group, right?
powerful.
So I mean that's been the journey to anchor and integrate, and also it has taught me a very valuable lesson that there are no perfect containers. There are only flawed containers in the world. But nonetheless, the transmission that you receive from every container has some worth and value. So you can choose to pick from what is worthy and what is valuable to you and leave the rest behind. It doesn't matter. Like I don't need to hang on and try to craft a perfect container because no perfect container exists. Like we're all human at the end of the day. We all create flawed systems,
Mm,
right? And it is what it is. So we can simply take from the transmission of power and the divinity that is moving through every flawed container and leave the rest behind and not take life so seriously.
mm. I want to add to that and be super transparent with my own listeners and people who are part of my life. Most people at this point have witnessed this.
Mm.
Uh, there is I had a lot of disruption as well. You use the word
Yeah,
irritation. The word irritation.
yeah,
I want to go into that
yeah,
for a minute, and I
yeah.
appreciate that word. But I'll let what I'm about to say lead to our moment of pause because I'm looking at the time and I was like,
Hmm.
I want to take a pause at this moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'll just say this concept of irritation, and I like to use the word disruption. Um, is so valuable. Yeah, I won't share anything more right now. I'll just let's you I'll use that. Let's use that for our
Mhm.
moment of pause here. I really want to welcome in our container. Before I was in coaching, I was like, what does that mean?
Mm.
Container essentially is like it's the best. We're not in four walls, we're not in a house
Yeah,
connecting in this way. And even when we're in a house or a retreat center, that's still a container because there is the explicit doorways of the
yeah.
structure, and then there's energetically, emotionally, consciously what is being
Mm.
constructed and created so greater safety can be there.
Mm.
So maybe just by example, that all containers are imperfect. We can create a little, we're already in a container through holding this space, but we can create a little 5-minute container here
Yeah.
of, um, I'll let you bring what you want, but I think just some welcoming. I'd love to welcome it in our experience and then the experience of anyone who's been listening, a space of invitation toward that
Mm.
irritation. I'll initiate and then I'll just hand it over to you for anything that you might want to add. But I just welcome right now that the presence of irritation be seen, be witnessed by you. You are capable of both experiencing pain and seeing it. And part of living in this out of balance, hyper masculine state is a quickness, a desire to resolve things quickly. And so we're invited when we begin to work with soma, mind, body, spirit, energy, field, cosmos, to begin to be present to what is without the need to resolve it immediately. And I invite you just to breathe and find where your feet are. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel the seat under you. Feel your lower back, your neck, your shoulders, your jaw, your forehead. Can you allow a little more of what you're going through to be here? We'll just sit here for a couple more seconds and I'll pass this container over to this guidance of this container over to my dear collaborator, Anusha, and allow you to just infuse or add anything that you would like.
There is a beautiful saying here within the Lalita Sahasranama, which is 1,000 names of the goddess Lalita, Lalita, the playful one. And it's said that she emerges from the Chittagni. So in the Sanskrit language, there's a verse that says, Chittagni Kunda Sambhuta Devakarya Samudhyata, which means she who rises from the Chittagni, from the fire that is lit in the consciousness. And then she comes and works her divine will through the world, manifests through the world. So when I see irritabilities and frictions in the world, in the mind space, especially when we are moving through moments in life when what we've known and learned are being unlearned, where things are not sitting well with our nervous system, when things are irritable, when thoughts are creating friction between what is right, what is wrong, how it should be, should not be, how it would have, could have, should have. Simply any friction that arises in the mind, the friction has the ability to create a spark. The spark that can ignite your authenticity and allow for divinity to anchor in through you. So, a grand recognition that this Chit Agni, the fire of friction within the mind space, is a potent vessel or tool for the manifestation of divinity moving through you. So, welcoming in these frictions, welcoming in these irritabilities, these disruptions, because as in the tarot deck, the tower, you always see the tower breaking down, being struck by lightning, being wiped down to the floor, so that something new can be built. So these irritations are an invitation, really, to disrupt and bring down to the ground the shaky foundations in the mind and anchor in a solid foundation of trust, of growth, of openness, of allowance, of love, of unconditionality, an anchoring of imperfections, really anchoring that collective consciousness that we're constantly evolving, we're constantly growing, we are constantly transforming. And we will always face moments in life, whereas the Lalita Sahasranamam says, Chittagni Kunda Sambhuta, that we will rise from the fires of frictions created in our mind, within our consciousness, Deva Karya Samudhyata, to bring in an anchor divinity and do God's work, or goddess's work, or divine work, for the good of not only yourself, but for the good of the world, the good of the community, to anchor in abundance within yourself and your community and the world that we live in, to anchor kindness, to anchor light, to anchor authenticity, honor, truth, and to anchor allowance, allowance to succeed and allowance to fail. In the name of the goddess, allowing for the light to move through you. Sri Matre Namaha.
Thank you.
Mm.
Hmm. What is alive for you as we take the last 10 minutes or so of this conversation?
Mm. I think what's What's coming up for me as a theme currently in my life is definitely around gatekeeping wisdom.
Mm.
That's something that has been sitting with me heavy and that's been moving through me. It feels like it's raw, it's real, it's here.
That's beautiful.
Um, yeah, and when you look at all of the ancient philosophies in the world, they have so much to offer as empowerment within your being. And yet, it's all gate kept. If I had to date back where this all began, it's kind of confusing. I haven't yet gone down to the source of where it all began. But I truly believe that wisdom teachings, ancient teachings, philosophies need to be open source. They shouldn't be held in the hands of a few so-called chosen ones. Um, and then for them to decide if you are worthy enough for it.
Ooh.
If the philosophy itself says that everything that exists is a part of the collective consciousness, is a fragment of the universe itself, is divinity in human form, animal form, plant form, then who are we to deem something worthy and unworthy? Everything is already innately worthy. So then, why the gatekeeping? Who put the authority in these people's hands? I'm sure Jesus didn't come and say that only you chosen ones shall take my teachings forward and everybody else shall learn from you. He was all about sharing it with the whole world. I don't think ISIS ever said that only a few people can have access to this. Shiva and Shakti surely didn't. There is no division in the cosmos, right? There's only collaborations and collective. There's no division in nature either. There's only collaborations and collective. Then why, as humans, did we think that it would be a good idea to divide and bring in so much conflict and bring in a sense of abandonment deep within ourselves, right? This division has caused us to sow seeds of abandonment, seeds of superiority and inferiority. It's almost like genetically modified seeds. That's not the natural way of living, but we've just created it. Yeah.
These conversations get dangerous in the best way. I'll use that to share a third story, which is also when we had first started. I'm going to ask you for advice about that when I come back from
Mm-hmm.
this. Okay, advice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just wisdom or insight into what it might look like as to not gatekeep to the alternative.
Yeah.
Um, but when I first started with you coaching, not just in that one session we had had, which was an exchange, but we decided to be partners and work together over 3 months. And it was the first session. And that night I woke up at 4 a.m. and my
Mm.
head was buzzing. And I have been in a long-term relationship with organized religion my whole life. And I chose that day to leave that space, the
Mm.
specific space that I was in at that time.
Mm.
That I don't think it's even important to name the name of because I have switched
Yeah.
and recreated allegiance in different spaces over and over, seeking a type of rigidity, regularity, and rightness.
Mm.
And I think that's more important to name than even naming what the space is.
Yeah.
And when you spoke earlier about the importance of acknowledging the imperfection of containers and also that we're allowed to play, I want
Mm.
to share that for people who feel deeply aligned to a specific practice or place. This can often feel like a family, and it really
Yeah.
might your literal family and your culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the process of disintegrating yourself not can feel disintegrating. Disintegrating feels like falling apart. And what I'm saying is disintegrating from it because you're completely integrated within it
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Enmeshed.
enmeshed. And that can, there is a longer process there. And it's why with Liberatory Love, I have this focus on religion and sexuality together and their interrelationship. But that night with you was the first time with you invoking the goddess, with you invoking the play, with you invoking the welcoming, with you invoking everything you were, that I felt this permission to be in full respect of the place that I was connected to, that I had my own issues with, be in full respect of myself. And when I woke up at that moment at 4 a.m., I went and I actually chose to read a whole bunch of stuff as
Mm,
related to that this organization had public. And
mm,
to just say, to be in this moment where I was like, you know what? I actually think it's beautiful how they've framed it. And
mm.
it's not how I see it.
Yeah.
And I need to remove myself from this space for me.
Mm,
And there was ease and there was peace. And, it's still a disentanglement process, not a single moment. But what your transmission and your presence gave me in that moment was some of the first permission that I have felt to not feel like I'm abandoning, to
mm.
not feel like I'm disobeying, to not feel like I'm giving up responsibility
Yeah.
or giving up myself. It was this recognition that I get to hold all of that and I also get to move out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every person has to make this choice in their own way. I am not here to say like we all
This
have
is right or wrong. Yeah.
exactly stay here, move there. Like these are
Yeah.
nuanced questions, but that's also something that's very important is to let yourself be
Yes.
in the nuance. But
Yes.
line that the cosmos itself doesn't divide itself. Can we
Yes.
be here? And I used to say a phrase back when I was not in Vita, not even associating with a specific religion, but still exploring God. I used to say to some friends because they'd be like, "Why do you use the word God?" And I'd say, I could drop the word, but to me, dropping the word, and I did for a while, but I was like, to me, dropping the word feels like choosing to not say the word dad because my dad hurt me. Like my father did not hurt me in that way. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to clarify, but like dropping the word doesn't get rid of the concept. And there's a
Yeah.
prominent thinker here, Sam Harris, who wrote a book, Letter to a Christian Nation. And I love that book for pointing out a whole bunch of moral contradictions in the US and the West. But at the end of the book, he proposes like essentially we should just drop the word God because no one knows what it means and it doesn't have any basis in reality, was like how he framed it. And like we won't get into all that here, but my invitation and my stance is you drop that's again, you can drop the word love, it doesn't make love not exist. So we want to be in inquiry about the unseen, the
Yeah.
unknown. And it can be easy to not just have gatekeeping around that through the form of spiritual practice and organized religion, but also the separation and segregation of those things from the rest of society and culture and science and everything else. And that's also a choice and a decision to pretend that that is an outside thing that some of us choose and some of us don't.
Yeah.
And it's not to say we all will identify with it in the same way, but it's just another space of division that I would like to speak to that is an invitation that I also see us as humans having to or getting to walk with in this
Mm.
next season of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an allowance to be, right? Like above everything else, it's the allowance of being. Like, I loved what you said that just by not saying the word God doesn't mean that divinity doesn't exist. Or just by dropping the word God how do you abandon it, right? How do you abandon your connection to it? It's almost like saying, I'm abandoning my heart.
Mm,
How do you abandon your heart, which is so entwined with your life?
mm,
You can say 100 things, but that doesn't mean that it's really going to anchor in, right? I think it's more about finding the right language, the
mm,
language that sits well with you. For some people, God could be in a form like Jesus, or it could be in the form of Krishna or Shakti or Shiva, right? For somebody, it could be just divinity, that I'm open to God showing up in any which way or form at all, like as a human, as an animal, as anything. For some people, it's the entire cosmos is divinity. And their language is that the universe sent me this, the universe gifted me this, the universe blessed me with this. For some people, it's nature. Mother Earth gifted me this, nature gave me this. So it's about finding your language of how you want to see divinity, right? At the end of the day, when you're not in reverence and when you believe that you're the only one controlling life and creating life, it does two things, in my perspective. One is that it creates such a big ego that you're high and mighty and you're the one doing everything. And the second one that it creates is that it creates a sense of disconnect and also a sense of pressure. Like, I'm the only one here and I'm responsible for everything. But imagine if your nervous system had the safety to say that I'm doing my bit, I'm co creating, and universe, divinity, God, goddess, X, support me through this. There's already automatically a support system that is created in your nervous system that I'm doing half, the other half is taken care of by something that I can't perceive. Like in every somatic session that we do, we call in a supportive figure, right? An archetype that will help us. Divinity is that unseen archetype that's inside of us, outside of us, everywhere around us, that works on us, through us, and for us.
mm.
Yeah.
Which leads me to this will be my last contributions, and then I'm gonna let you take it home, and then I'll just close this out. But the feminine also, when we're looking at words, same,
Mhm.
same. If you
Yeah.
don't like the word, just like regardless of how you encounter divinity, there is
Yeah.
you get to explore that, regardless of whether humankind has gone through a great forgetting of the feminine or an extermination of language for it. It's here. We get to frickin' find it. We get to discover it. We get to find words. We get to look to India, which is a culture and a tradition that has actually had female goddesses uplifted.
Yeah.
We get to look toward other traditions who have had it in different ways and had it destroyed, including all the formal religions as well, which have other
Yes.
alternative figures in them that have not been uplifted. And so I want to bring that. And then I also want to speak to the gatekeeping side of as we explore words for the feminine, as we go through this movement of feminine awakening, which is that it's really a provocative statement to all of us that let's not pretend women are the gatekeepers of this alone. Women are not
Mm.
the gatekeepers alone of the feminine. The feminine, and at the same time, the female body contains wisdom for all of us to learn from.
Mm.
Contains knowledge, contains wisdom because of it's my belief because of the ancestral and generational things we are holding, but also because of the architecture of the female body.
Yes.
And also, I think it's a game and it's something tricky if if feminine awakening and feminine leadership is synonymous with women gathering and women leadership because
Mm.
we are at a time where men, you are included in this conversation. You are needed in this conversation. I heard Richard Rudd, who founded the Gene Keys, say this phrase that it's almost like the seed of the masculine is held in the heart of the feminine, and the seed of the feminine is held in the heart of the opposite.
Mm.
I can't get
Mm.
that right
Mm.
now, but I think you get the image. And
Yeah.
this has actually really helped me to consider because there is actually, I've learned a lot of what I consider femininity from men who have been able to love me deeply. And I feel I'm actually bringing a new flavor of masculinity to a lot of the men in my life because of the way that I'm approaching it through
Mm.
my own foundation and my femininity. So I just want to welcome that that curiosity from us and open to your thought as well, but welcome that curiosity of the collective seeking and uncovering of this reunion.
Yeah, beautiful, beautifully put. I have three things that I'd like to address in what you said, right? Um, the first thing that I'd like to address is actually cancel culture.
Hmm.
We're living in a world where anything that doesn't sit well with me, I'm canceling, I'm blocking, I'm negating, I'm dissing, I'm abusing, I'm like going all out full force and trying to bring it and tear it down, right? But if you look at the law of the universe itself, everything deserves to exist, including the darkness. Stars wouldn't twinkle without the dark canvas of the cosmos, right? Black holes wouldn't exist, nebula dust wouldn't exist. Each one has its own place in the cosmos. So everybody has their role to play in the world itself. By canceling each other, firstly, we're bringing in so much judgments, right, towards another of how we're trying to bring in a uniform culture. We're trying to say that this is what it is, and the whole world should embody it. But are we trying to create an entire world that is just uniform culture? Like, then what about geographical differences, physiological differences? What about all of that? There's diversity, there's beauty in diversity, there's uniqueness in diversity. So when we're saying that this thing is to be cultured because this is not who I am, cancelled because this is not who I am, you are preventing from that uniqueness from existing, right? You can simply be like, that's not in alignment with me, and I can drop it and move on. So this is something that I really want to address because when you are canceling somebody else, you're also so much in fear of being canceled yourself. So
Wow.
there's so much also suppression, constant suppression of my authenticity. So even if I do align with parts of what that person's saying, but parts of it I don't, I'm too scared to even accept that parts of it I do accept because what if I get canceled? I want to be relevant. I want to belong to a tribe. This is attacking the core of our being, right? Of being and belonging. This cancel culture is attacking so much of that need to belong that some of us just cancel because we want to belong to the tribe that we are already existing in. And going against it would mean risking being dumped from the tribe. That's one thing that I want to bring in, and I want to hear your thoughts on it if you have anything to add.
Ooh. I will add thank you for speaking it. And then also that when it comes to our promotion of diversity, that yes, we want to be critical. It doesn't mean that we ignore, I think there's one upliftment in cancel culture that if it's not at its extreme, what it can be is collective or group calling out of something that we no longer want to be okay.
Correct.
Like a multi-billionaire entering the White House doing a Nazi symbol who cannot get canceled. He actually,
Correct.
the people who are in power never get canceled. So let's
Yeah.
actually evaluate where we're putting our energy, because what I also hear from what you're saying is the part that's so important is how much energy are we losing in needing to buffer ourselves? I have to put a wall
Yes.
up here. I have to put a wall up here. I have to put a wall up here. It's like putting floaties on so much that you can't even feel the water in the pool anymore. Did you come here to swim or did you
Agreed.
come here to be on the floaty?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, we get to grow in I also believe we're in a sensitive time. And if you're, and give yourself the space. If you're moving through something right now and you absolutely cannot be in the presence of men, or you cannot be in the presence of the social media, or you cannot be in the presence of XYZ thing, give yourself the space. But
Yeah.
let's not reconstruct the world to need to meet our everyday.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And the second thing that I want to bring here is the gatekeeping itself, right? Like gatekeeping of not only the feminine, I would say gatekeeping of everything precious in the world. Like I understand, and I'm speaking in the context of spirituality right now when I say this, right? Every precious teaching in the world, there has to be some amount of gatekeeping, protection. I think protection would be the right word to use, just because of how it has transpired in the past with people coming and skewing the concepts and, exploiting the land and all of that. So I understand the level of protection that people are feeling towards these teachings, right? But if you look back a few thousand years ago, there were such beautiful, respectful cultural exchanges that happened. If I root back to the history of Tantra itself, and I've been deep diving into it very deeply off late, is that when you look at Kashmiri Shaivism and how it came down south and how the culture itself emerged here, there was respectful cultural exchange even within India. And between India and Tibet, India and China, there was respectful cultural exchange that happened, because of which Chinese Taoism itself evolved the way it did, Tibetan Tantra evolved the way it did. It had flavors of its own that had nothing to do with Tantra, while also imbuing with it, philosophies of Tantra that today Tantra takes from Tibetan Tantra as well. The classical Indian Tantra receives back from it. So there's like beautiful, respectful cultural exchange that's happening here. Similarly, I'm on a 13-week shamanic training program right now. And one of the first things that they said in the call was that these teachings were given to us by 14 men and women who traveled all the way from the Indus civilization through Siberia and reached us and gave us these rites of initiation. So to think that, from here, things have gone and shifted and it's same, but it's different. Like it has reminiscence of what we have here. Like philosophically, it's so similar, but at the same time, it has such a uniqueness and a language that we have lost. So I'm able to bridge all of this together. If you look at ancient alchemical practices within Egypt, it looks so much like our Kundalini practices in India. So when you look at these things, it's like ancient cultures in the world spoke the same language. They spoke the language of the soul. Over a period of time, with the onslaught of gatekeeping and trying to unify culture and bring everything under one fold, we've lost the connection to all of this. And today we find ourselves grappling to even receive information. Like in India, everything is gatekept by gurus who will deem whether you're worthy or unworthy to give that information to. Or you'll have to pay like a shit ton of money to get an initiation. I'm talking thousands and thousands of dollars, right? So
And
it
who
comes
knows
down
what
to, so
other
does,
costs.
and so it questions like, oh, so does that mean only the wealthy are eligible to reach divinity? Like, is that what you're trying to say? Which seems cute, right? If you say that divinity exists everywhere and we are all divine, then everybody should have access to this. And I understand there has to be checks and balances and also a languaging that says don't culturally appropriate this. Be respectful. Let there be, respectful exchange. These are how the teachings have been given to me. This is how I'm offering it to you. Allow for yourself to learn the grammar before you break the grammar. And when you break the grammar, don't say that this was tantric grammar. Say that this was Libby's grammar, Anusha's grammar, right? The problem arises where you take English grammar, you break it and call it English grammar. Once you've broken the grammar, it becomes your unique medicine in the world, right? But so many of us are scared to present that unique medicine. So we want to hide behind labels that are safer. How is that fair?
And how is that fair for all of us? Because we also deserve to have your transmission,
Yeah.
humans in the world. I say that as
Yes.
who, holds the both and of like there's more pure transmissions, and
Right.
also we came here to grow and test and become.
Absolutely. Like, I can give you a very simple example, right? Even of your own self. Like, you've been through a transformational journey where you have reconnected to your faith in a very unique way. It doesn't mean that you are suddenly an atheist today. It simply means you have a different set of language. Like, you've been in the system. You've learned the grammar, and then you've broken the grammar to reconnect to it in your own unique way. And when you present it like that, you're able to hold a container of transmission for everybody who's going through a similar journey as you. But if you were to not embody your unique medicine and you were to still hide behind the grammar while you have already broken it, for somebody who doesn't know the grammar, they'll think that's what it is.
Ooh, that's gorgeous. And and
So
and as
that's
an
my invitation.
yes, and as an invitation, it really does get fun out here. There really is so much permission. That's what I would
Yeah,
just from the vantage point I'm at now, which is a year and a half outside of my own, I mean, 12 years of my journey of exploring outside of Christianity in the way that I was taught, but a year and a half outside of organized Abrahamic based faith. There's so much more permission. There's so much more permission than we realize.
yeah. And the third thing that I want to address is femininity and calling in the masculine, right? Calling in men into this practice. Like I loved what you said that there is so much gift in the physiology and in the physical body of a woman. Yes. Which today I'm able to recognize it. And it's also scientifically proven. If you think about it, like matrilineage is a big thing because it's also biological. It's not just spiritual or woo woo. It's so biological because you as an egg was created in your grandmother's womb when your mother was in her womb. And this is not just me pulling something out of thin air. This is biological, like this is biology. So it goes to say directly that everything that was in the container of your grandmother as nutrients, as trauma, emotions, everything, energetic, physical, biological, was what has been an imprint given to you as an egg, as an egg in your mother's womb. So one part of you is thanks to your grandmother, which also includes generational trauma, which also includes, the gifts of your lineage. So this is something as women we're biologically gifted or cursed with, right? It's debatable, but we've been given this from biology. But there are so many practices to embody the feminine, even for the men out there. And no man can be a fully embodied man unless he dances between the feminine and the masculine, because the feminine brings in the essence of chaos, like in every situation, to the ability to disrupt and create chaos, while seeing the creativity in chaos, while bringing in sensuality and play and flow, right? So imagine having that power in a masculine body that is built for structure and discipline. You'd be unbeatable. And similarly with the
Sexy.
feminine, which is so easy. Yeah, it's so easy for the feminine to go into chaos and flow and play and all of that. Imagine bringing in the masculine structure and discipline to that. That's an unstoppable woman. So it's about embodying your unstoppable self by drifting a little into the opposite polarities, right? And this I'm speaking about anybody who is even identifying as one or the other. If you identify as a man, try to shift a little bit into the feminine aspect and come back to the masculine. So we all have a dominant side of us. Some of us are more dominantly feminine, some of us are more dominantly masculine. But whichever is not our dominant side, to allow for that complementality to come in every now and then so that we can create a whole, right? We can create a whole. And when we are whole, we're not seeking validation from anybody else. The validation is innately coming up from the inner masculine and the feminine mirroring you, internally reflecting your own light so that it can shine and take up space and spread that brilliance and that radiance of who you are, creating that magnetism. That is my invitation, the invitation to embody your full human potential.
Thank you for the space. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the presence. Thank you for the willingness to be with irritation. Thank you for coming into my practice mid ritual or my ritual mid without knowing, but there's gonna be plenty more where that came from. And I also put out as we close this, I'm putting out an invitation for a future conversation, a future in-person gathering, and so much love and invitation to men, women, non-binary, and trans people, and all beings, all things, exploring these polarities and all that is in between as we embody the fullness of who we are.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Libby. It has been such a joy to anchor everything that feels real and raw in my system here and now, and to have this conversation really and reflect divinity between each other. I think you are such a beautiful embodiment of divinity, and every time I have a conversation with you, I feel so seen and held and validated. So thank you for being you and for everything that you're anchoring in this world as elegance, as love, as liberation.
Anusha's Academy of Alchemy is a place to learn, to witness yourself in a new way, to learn new tools, to be held. There's virtual experiences, there's in-person experiences if you're in India, and
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other ways that you open up portals for people to be connected that you'd like to share before you go.
I do hold coaching containers for people, for individuals, as well as for couples, 3 month and 6 month coaching containers. But I would actually like to highlight an offering which is coming up, which is a unique offering, which is going to be up on the Academy page, Anusha's Academy of Alchemy, which is the 9 sacred nights of the goddess, starting from March 30th. It's an invitation to 9 nights with the divine feminine, to anchor in transformation, growth, irritation, disruptions, and just transformations, which is anchoring in the ancient teachings of Tantra around the Navaratris, the 9 sacred nights with the goddess, to embody the essence of the goddess, the chaos of the goddess, the softness of the goddess, the sensuality of the goddess, and everything that is the divine feminine. So if you're curious, like what is the divine feminine, and I want to know more, I think that's a good starting point. So this is an invitation to all your audiences who'd be interested in this to come take a look, be curious, and ask me questions if you have any. Yeah, that's it.
9 days, baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, goddess.